Hello.
Hi. I was like waiting for the hello.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm good. It's Sunday again.
It is Sunday. Yes, it is. What have we done today?
We ate
twice.
we did eat twice.
I had a very long day yesterday.
Finally,
I was gone.
Yeah, you were gone all day, but you finally finished your tasks for.
Yes, but not the bonus one. I don't know if it's going to happen
Unite.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's going to be a stretch.
It was a tough one
Yeah, the Porkies are
because
maybe out of reach.
this conspiracy theory was that Adventure Sync was supposed to launch.
Indeed.
Perhaps, I don't know, based on certain comments
Needing
and suggestions. And yeah,
Porkies,
why would
15,
because
maybe.
everything that they've done has matched up, like the adding friends,
And coordinated.
like that was leading up to gifts. And
yeah,
then,
something went wrong.
Yeah,
Some
we don't
kind
know.
of bug, probably.
We'll see.
If I had to speculate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I finished my first week of teaching for spring semester.
You did.
2020. I almost said
Smooth?
2019.
Was it smooth?
2020. Was it smooth? It was really busy. I think that so this is actually my second semester as an assistant professor. So that part was a little easier because I've been at this place now for a little bit of time, and I think that's part of the hardest part of going somewhere new is figuring out things. Where to find things, what you're supposed to be doing. And
You think Hogwarts professors have tenure track?
they're already tenured.
Only Ilvermorny
Actually,
in America
I don't know.
has
Yeah, do you think
probationary periods.
well, we haven't met this person yet, but do you think Lockhart has
Yeah, Lockhart had glowing recommendations.
Do you think he signed a 1-year contract? I guess is what I would say. Like, what kind of contract do you sign? Do you sign like up at 3 years you'll be reviewed and rehired?
Yeah, even if it went well, he was probably going to leave,
Because, I'm pretty sure McGonagall has her job for as long as she wants it.
Yeah.
Probably Snape, too. He probably gets results. I don't know.
Snape,
Yeah.
He's got the protection of the dean.
Yeah.
You want to get into it?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay,
I'm
Juan's ready. You're ready? Juan's ready. Okay, let's turn to page 12, Dobby's warning. Today's lesson is called Safe or Free. A synopsis. The chapter begins with Harry face to face with an unfamiliar and agitated being who introduces himself as Dobby. Dobby the house elf vaguely warns Harry of a dangerous plot that's going to take place at Hogwarts the upcoming year, but is forbidden from giving too many details about how and what he knows. Dobby reveals that he has been hiding Ron's and Hermione's letters to Harry in an effort to stop him from wanting to go back to Hogwarts. Dobby's mission is simply to prevent Harry from being exposed to danger. So when Harry refuses to stay away from Hogwarts, Dobby causes mayhem at Privet Drive during Vernon's important business dinner. Vernon promptly locks Harry away after learning that Harry cannot legally do magic outside of school. The chapter ends with Harry waking up to the face of Ron Weasley at Privet Drive.
Ronald! Oh.
To the rescue, old Ron.
Oh my goodness. Dobby. So, I'm like still going back to or thinking about the first book. So it actually happens much later when Harry encounters like a new character, which is Hagrid. And it's kind of like, who is this guy? Do I trust him? What's going on? He's telling me things. This is obviously much sooner. It's second chapter, but it's a similar dynamic where you have Dobby, hello, who's been watching you because he recognized his eyes from the bush or being in the bushes.
It's such a similar dynamic, and it's great. It plays out well because to me it really emphasizes the fact that although Harry is in the wizarding world, there's still much that he doesn't know.
Yeah.
He's not even familiar with the creature type.
Yeah. Because he's like, in his head, he's thinking,
who is this?
I want to ask, like, what are you? But
Yeah,
it seems
I
rude.
love that. I almost wrote that down as my quote, but Winston just went under the new couch.
Oh, good.
He's hiding.
He's terrified.
He's not actually. He just is mischievous. He
needs attention really bad.
Or he's going to pee under
there.
Well. Yeah. Yes. I guess I hadn't really thought of the juxtaposition.
It just crossed my mind right now when you were talking because I was
nice.
like, who is this Dobby? Do we trust you? What are you saying to me?
Immediately, he's so endearing in
Yeah.
a very different but similar way to Hagrid.
Yeah.
There's, even though Dobby is some possibly magically caused, he's very withholding, right? He's very vague. Hagrid is, well, he's also somewhat withholding about some of the things that he knows, right? About Voldemort and other things, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
But they're both very sincere, right? I mean, Dobby's very physical with his sincerity, like the fact that he's talking about needing to punish himself for taking some of these actions it's an astonishing introduction to a character. It's just so great. I mean, and I love that moment, right, where J.K. Rowling writes about Harry's internal monologue to himself about like he wanted to ask what, but thought it would be rude.
Yeah.
It's a great way of showing us very quickly like an integral part of Harry of like that he would think about something like that.
Yeah.
And that consideration would help him shape how he would treat this being. And the way he treats this being is important.
Right. Yeah.
In the short term and in the long term. Yeah.
No, for sure. It definitely, again, highlights. I mean, we saw glimpses in the first book as well of Harry's, like, who he is. And my favorite quote kind of speaks to that a little, where after Harry asks if he can help Dobby.
That's my quote too.
Really?
Yeah, I can see it on your screen.
Dobby has heard of your greatness, sir, but of your goodness, Dobby never knew.
He never knew.
And we had similar, there's this distinction between great and good, which is kind of funny because like in Wizards Unite, or also like in terms of how we use hierarchies in language, good is below great. But this idea that like the Sorting Hat, you could be great, you know, or Ollivander, yeah. You know.
Terrible.
And, great. So like great as this like impactful, like powerful sense. But it's something
not a moral
different.
Quality.
Yeah, it's something different to be good. Right. And to be good, I mean, because we also know from certain characters, you can be good, but you don't necessarily have to be like grand about it. You don't have to like carry this greatness or this like labeling that Harry always carries around with him of, you know, being the chosen one and having that follow him around. So again, he doesn't have to be good, but he is.
Yeah, totally. I mean, she does. This is one of my all-time favorite chapters of the whole series. I mean,
really?
Yeah, it's just so good. I mean, from a budding writer perspective, like, how do you start a book? How do you follow up on a story that people are? What was that, Winston?
I don't know. He's being a bad puppy.
Hey,
come here. We will resume.
And we won't cut.
Yeah.
Classic Winston. He's the third member of the podcast crew. He's the most disruptive.
He is, for sure.
It's
puppy energy.
You bring a lot, I do a little bit, and then Winston disrupts us. But he's
sorry.
cute.
What were you saying?
Just a great
writer.
chapter. Yeah, I just love the chapter. I don't know. There's something about it. The flow of it. It all takes place just in his little bedroom. It's just one character. It's just dialogue. I mean, okay, well, there's a little bit more at the end. Yeah. But it's like we go from, and the juxtaposition of like ending chapter 1 with like somebody showing up at Privet Drive, and it's like, what, the magical community is here, and then like he leaves, and it's like, oh, well, now what's gonna happen? And end the chapter again in the same thing, revealing that Dobby has been keeping the letters. Like that's such a quick move, but like I love that. Because it's like, why aren't they writing to him? What's going on?
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that last chapter because that it's weighing on Harry. Because even when he's talking about, he's like, "Oh, I'm not, Hermione, you know, my friend Hermione is the smartest, you know," and then it's like, "Oh, pain." Because I mean, if you think about it, like Harry finally found his possibly first real friends and had this whole experience with them. It's all of these like, and then it's just like, "Oh, sorry."
Yeah.
You're nobody. Nobody wants you. You're not actually part of this.
Yes.
I don't know.
Well, that gets to this title that I was, as always, I play around with titles. Today I just sat there for like 15 minutes staring at the screen until I decided on something. I was playing around with a lot of ideas, but I think there's a very clear jailing motif here of like being Vernon, obviously, but like Harry is in this prison that is Privet Drive, right? And the prison is made even worse by Dobby because he is cutting off what would be like some of the lifelines to Harry to the world that he wants to belong to, right? He talks about belonging. He brings it up. Like, I don't belong here. And she emphasizes it for him as well in the text, like belong is in italics. And so Dobby's, it's an ends and means thing, right? Do the ends justify the means? What he wants is safety, but he is going about it in such a imprisoning way that it's frustrating. Basically, my thought is like, even if Harry dies this year, is exposed to this danger, and this terrible thing happens, or whatever Dobby is portending happening, that to me is arguably better than having Harry like imprisoned in Privet Drive.
Yeah, I think that theme kind of is very much, I mean, we don't know much about house elves right now, but we as people who know the wizarding world understand that. But that's kind of like this introduction where Dobby is explaining that he has a family that he serves and like they're masters, and he's describing it. And Harry makes a comment, I didn't write it down, but it's like, oh, that makes it seem like, or the Dursleys seem almost human. And so like, yeah,
Extra
there's this
punishment.
There's this interesting, I think overall, like in our societies, like thinking about what you give up in the name of safety, we do that quite often. And I mean, it is something that is interesting to contrast, like safety, freedom, or like imprisonment, like that sort of idea of like, what is it? I get it from the perspective of like, you're trying to have this protection, and it goes into this sort of like, we have the statute of secrecy, like that as a notable thing as well for the wizarding world. So introducing the statute of secrecy that is supposed to be protective, but at what cost? Like, okay, so, and that is of course more complicated because we had actual persecutions that were happening, we had wars, we had conflict, and the reaction was like, okay, let's just hide ourselves and go under. But it is an interesting thing to consider and pick apart a little bit of what choices that we make, like individually, but also like our responsibility to each other. And so we make laws, we make these decisions and say like, oh, this is the best thing that we can do for our survival or for whatever it is to keep people safe.
Yeah, it's a rather famous tension, right? Like freedom and safety. Whether it's always truly in tension is we can think about. If are there ways that, laws or what might be perceived as less freedom is actually like, I don't know. There's stuff to debate, but certainly at many times they are somewhat at odds, right? You can act in ways that are safer, but are maybe not expressions of being more free. And I think it's reasonable even to think at a personal level of the ways that you try to keep yourself safe from things. I know I do. And that often comes at the cost of expressing myself in certain ways or doing other things, And I don't know if people want to call that freedom, they can, but creative expression, other things, doing certain things, taking risks, making these different choices. You can avoid doing those things for sure. And it may feel more safe or even be more safe, but is it a trade-off that you want to make is, always a question to me.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think about social media and how we use it, and how what's currently happening is a lot of like, oh, we're digging up dirt on people and like receipts from like 10 years ago,
cancel
culture. And so, yeah, so the safe like advice that we certainly have been told is like, oh, don't post things. And it's like, okay. I mean, that is one response. Are there alternative responses or ways of being that are more complex?
Certainly.
Like maybe we don't react so aggressively all the time. That could be,
don't freeze people,
you know, and it's just so complicated. And I mean, that's like I don't know, like a, I guess, modern example that is kind of, I don't know, I go back and forth. Sometimes when I think about things like the internet, I'm like, all of this is so silly, but it's not any different than other conflicts or situations and from the past. Like lots of things can seem silly, like when you're distanced enough from it and, you know, have a grounding of like, okay, this is not worth whatever's happening right here.
Yeah. I think the other aspect to this, which ties in, is the trace, which is a very similar concept of safe and free and being tracked and being surveilled.
Yeah, that was my not creative title suggestion
to
chat.
Surveilled. It's a really good title, yeah.
But
Dobby's been watching.
Yeah,
the Ministry's been watching too.
Yeah. So Harry gets this letter from Mafalda Hopkirk from the improper use of magic office, and yeah. So the trace is fascinating to me because. So from the letter, it seems that the Ministry knew that there was magic that took place at the residence and what the spell was.
Right.
Not who.
Right.
So underage witches and wizards have a magical trace on them until they are 17. The idea being that, I mean, well, it's too dangerous for you as someone who's learning to use magic to use magic. What if something goes wrong? Except for, there is an exception, which is interesting to me, that it's kind of like built in, except for in emergencies.
Yes.
I thought you were going to be like, you are correct, sir.
Yes, you are correct, sir.
What I was thinking, though, is like, okay, so let's say I am under 17, Hogwarts student. I go home and I'm Draco Malfoy. What's to stop him from like just going to people's houses and just casting magic?
Absolutely nothing. Yeah, I'm trying to actually, I got quiet there because I was racking my brain trying to think of when we learn exactly. Is it this book that we learn that the trace is limited in that way, that the way that she writes the letter from Mafalda, she being J.K. Rowling, is obviously intentional because it is aligned with the limits of the trace. You know that magic occurs in the proximity of an underage wizard, and Harry is a very, very, very unique case, and this will come into play in later book, where like the Ministry knows that there shouldn't be an overage wizard near Harry, and therefore any magic happening there will be assigned to him, and he will take blame for it.
Yeah, I don't think that it's in this book because when I was looking through the wikis, I think it's in later books. Yeah, I think that it is. Okay. But there is an interesting Reddit thread that I found where someone was questioning whether this law, we know that laws are made in context and by people. So there's socio-historical, political factors that are probably involved. But just questioning whether the trace law might have been designed to target Muggle-born. Because, so the idea was that like
if magic happens,
so it would be,
you don't have a wizard nearby that you know of.
I mean, it might not be the case. It might be this like the intention was, it might be intended just for protection of like underage witches and wizards. However, in practice, it might target Muggle-born or anyone who I guess Muggle-born are like the only people that, or the group that I would see as most obviously impacted, because like we're saying, so no one in that house should be practicing magic or is of age to be practicing magic because Harry is there, you know, and I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we've had other classes and discussions and things about talking about laws in principle and in practice and the difference here. and I think it's very significant, the fact that how the trace works, and to have it still be law, and to have an expectation essentially that like magical parents with magical children are just meant to police the children. So
Yes.
that makes
That
a
is
lot
the
of sense
quote
of where
that's
the
later.
theory comes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. But it's
So we
kind
don't
of
have that here, but
even in practice, even if it is completely practical, even if the trace was literally on the child, and you could tell that they were the one casting magic, I don't see the purpose of the law. Like, yes, okay, like you just don't want them to, because it's dangerous to them. They're going to malfunction or something. It's like, I don't know. It's it's a really interesting thing to juxtapose against like that then Hogwarts in like this controlled school, but we clearly see that it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, like people have accidents all the time, and like, yeah, it just is a very interesting law. It's totally realistic to me, but it's still an interesting one to be like, what is happening here? Like, I mean,
ultimately that's about power, right? So like who has the authority, or like who is capable of controlling a bunch, even though it seems more unreasonable at Hogwarts. You have like, I don't know, what, 5, 6 teachers, or however many teachers. You don't have the proportions of like the adults
30-1.
the adults who are supposed to be like protecting these underage children who have, yeah, that is a response.
We got
too.
Filch as one Filch.
Yeah,
per
one
school.
person monitoring the hallways.
He's problematic on his own. But no, it's
well. So if you can have a trace on like a proximity, why don't? I mean, not that I'm advocating for this, but why wouldn't you have the trace on the specific person? Like. Like, I don't know. These are questions about the limits of magic that we don't understand.
It just is. That's another reason why this is one of my favorite chapters. It's just such a small thing. He just gets this little letter, and the ramifications in the short term are like, well, now Vernon knows this, and he's going to hold it over you, right?
Yeah.
And like, because even at the end of the first book, I think Hagrid was like, oh, but they don't know that or whatever. You just threaten.
No,
Dudley.
they all get letters when they go home, and Harry's say like little notes like reminders.
Oh no, yeah, right.
Don't use
but
magic.
Hagrid is like, oh, but they don't know you can't use it. But now the Dursleys do. At the end of the first book, he says something like that. But it's not a throwaway moment. This trace, the idea of a trace, it keeps coming up. It'll crop back up over and over again, and it just is it's just really a brilliant idea. It's such a brilliant mechanic of magic. Tracing, surveillance. How would you like that this would exist, but it's not perfect, right? I think it's a really clever thing to make it not perfect. It's not like they just that was cast by Harry.
Then there's
it's
room
not even
for,
at the wand level.
Yeah.
It's like proximity based, and that's like it's like oh yeah.
Well, I was wondering if there's just like if it's Mafalda or someone else who's just kind of like sitting in an office, gets reports in,
listening to her police
and
scanning.
it's like and it's just like. I wonder also if so one layer of like dismissal or discarding would be like, oh, this is a pure blood family or whatever. It's just the Weasleys. It's fine. They've got it under control, right? Or if it's also like, oh well, this spell is like not that important, like
that's super interesting because now you're making me think of like how do they even process it this quickly? Obviously they have magic, but like.
Well, how many reports would they get in a day? Like
tons,
that's
tons and tons and tons.
You have Molly who's just like knitting shit all the time and like washing dishes and things.
And is it just pinging like crazy when Hogwarts is in session? It's just like
well, that was also what people were asking. They're like, oh, do they just like not have the trace on or kind of ignore it? Because I mean, in other I don't know.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it. I haven't, even though I loved it, I hadn't really. I'm sure there's still more to think about.
I would imagine that they would want to keep the trace on because, like, let's say Harry is like, I don't know, escapes from Hogwarts and is somewhere else just causing craziness. I don't know. Or Tom Riddle just escapes and like murders his parents. I mean, I don't. Oh, whoops! Spoiler. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I really.
It's
don't
a
know.
short chapter. But it just packs a wallop for me. Dobby is so intriguing to me. The trace is equally as intriguing. the fact that Ron has showed up is super exciting.
Ronald.
Like we get this like full crossover of like Ron, and like being able to position Ron in this way is going to be great in the next chapter as somebody who's like proactively like heroic in a serious way. And
yeah,
then,
Harry's nightmare at the end, like he's clearly like feeling trapped in the name of safety, because Dobby's like, at least you're safe.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And Harry's like, great, cool.
Yay.
As if Harry cared about safety.
Yeah.
That's not part of his like storyline.
He's lived his whole life trapped. He wants to spread his wings, you know?
Yeah.
It was fun. It was a fun chapter. I'm excited. We're already rolling. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So I think I didn't count the number of chapters in this book, but I think it's similar. But I'm excited. Be probably mid-year or even earlier. But
yeah.
Great.
All
Anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, until next time, Juan's ready.